We are all entitled to human rights. These include: first, the right to live free from violence and discrimination; two, to enjoy the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health; to be educated; to own property; to vote; and to earn an equal wage. But across the globe, many women and girls still face discrimination on the basis of sex and gender. Gender inequality underpins many problems which disproportionately affect women and girls, such as domestic and sexual violence, lower pay, lack of access to education, and inadequate health care. For many years, women's rights movements have fought hard to address this inequality, campaigning to change laws or taking to the streets to demand their rights are respected. And new movements have flourished in the digital age, such as the hashtag #MeToo campaign, which highlights the prevalence of gender-based violence and sexual harassment. And what do we mean when we talk about women's rights? What are we fighting for? And here are just some examples of the rights that have been fighting for. First is women's suffrage. During the 19th centuries, people began to agitate for the right of women to vote. In 1893, New Zealand became the first country to give women the right to vote on a national level. This movement grew to spread all around the world, and thanks to the efforts of everyone involved in the struggle, today women's suffrage is a right under the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. However, despite these developments, there are still many places around the world where it is very difficult for women to exercise this right. I'll take Syria, for example, where women have been effectively cut off from political engagement, including the ongoing peace process. In Pakistan, although voting is a constitutional right, in some areas women have been effectively prohibited from voting due to powerful figures in their communities, and they are using patriarchal local customs to bar them from going to the polls. And in Afghanistan, authorities recently decided to introduce mandatory photo screening at polling stations, making voting problematic for women in conservative areas where most women cover their faces in public. And after that, uh, we fought for sexual and reproductive rights. Everyone should be able to make decisions about their own body. Every woman and girl has sexual and reproductive rights. This means they are entitled to equal access to health services like contraception, to choose who they marry, and to decide if they want to have children or not. Women should be able to live without fear of gender-based violence, including rape and other sexual violence, female genital mutilation, forced marriage, forced pregnancy, forced abortion, or forced sterilization. But there's a long way to go until all women can enjoy these rights. And in Burkina Faso, Amnesty International has supported women and girls in their fight against forced marriage, which affects a huge number of girls, especially in rural areas. And in Sierra Leone, Amnesty International also has been working with local communities as part of our human rights education program, which focuses on a number of human rights issues, including female genital mutilation. In Zimbabwe, we can find that women and girls were left vulnerable to unwanted pregnancies and a higher risk of HIV infection because of widespread confusion around sexual consent and access to sexual health services. This means that girls would face discrimination, the risk of a child marriage, economic hardship, and of course barriers to education. And next problem is freedom of movement. Freedom of movement is the right to move around freely as we please, not just within the country we live in, but also to visit others. But again, many women face real challenge when it comes to this. This may not be allowed to have their own passport, or they might have to seek permission from a male guardian in order to travel. For example, recently in Saudi Arabia, there has been a successful campaign to allow women to drive, which had previously been banned for decades. But despite this landmark gain, the authorities continue to persecute and detain many women's rights activists simply for peacefully advocating for their rights. And last but not least, we fight for intersectional feminism. Intersectional feminism is the idea that all of the reasons someone might be discriminated against, including race, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, economic class, and disability. One way of understanding this would be to look at how this might apply in a real-world setting, such as Dominica, where many research has shown that women that women sex workers, who are often people of color or transgender or both, suffer torture and persecution by the police. So sad. So, how are women's rights being violated? Main problem of this topic is, of course, about gender inequality. And because of gender inequality, it can include some other problems like gender-based violence, sexual violence and harassment, workplace discrimination, and discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. Gender-based violence is when violent acts are committed against women and LGBTI people on the basis of their orientation. And gender-based violence happens to women and girls in disproportionate numbers. Globally, on average 30% of all women who have been in a relationship have experienced physical or sexual violence committed against them by their partner. Women are more likely to be victims of sexual assault, including rape, and are more likely to be the victims of so-called honor crimes. Violence against women is a major human rights violation. It is the responsibility of a state to protect women from gender-based violence. And sexual harassment means any unwelcome sexual behavior. This could be physical conduct and advances, demanding or requesting sexual favors, or using inappropriate sexual language. Sexual violence is when someone is physically sexually assaulted. Although men and boys can be victims of sexual violence, it is women and girls who are overwhelmingly affected. And after that, often women are the subject of gender-based discrimination in the workplace. In the workplace. One way of illustrating this is to look at the gender pay gap. Equal pay for the same work is a human right, but time and again women are denied access to a fair and equal wage. Recent figures show that women currently earn roughly 77% of what men earn for the same work. This leads to a lifetime of financial disparity for women, prevents them from fully exercising independence, and means an increased risk of poverty in later life. And in many countries around the world, women are denied their rights on the basis of sexual orientation, gender identity, or sex characteristics, like lesbian, bisexual, trans, and intersex women and gender non-conforming people face violence, exclusion, harassment, and discrimination. Many are also subjected to extreme violence, including sexual violence or so-called corrective rape and honor killings. So, why is it important to stand up for women's rights? Why? Because, first, women's rights are human rights. It might seem like an obvious point, but we cannot have a free and equal society until everyone is free and equal, until women enjoy the same rights as men. And until women enjoy the same rights as men, this inequality is everyone's problem. And then protecting women's rights makes the world a better place. According to the UN, gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls is not just a goal in itself, but it's the key to sustainable development, economic growth, and peace and security. Research has shown that this to be the case. Society gets better for everyone when women's rights are upheld and taken seriously. And last but not least, we are stronger when we work together. When everyone comes together to support women's rights, we can be so much stronger. And that's all about what I want to talk about women's rights. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.